All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since we've talked about Francis Ngannou, so I'm going to do a new Francis Ngannou video today. There's been a few articles and updates, I guess if you could call them that, recently regarding his situation and where he might end up. So we're going to talk about it. I'm going to read a few quotes, things like that, and then I'll give my reaction and opinion to this news. If I say something that you've heard before and you're a regular listener or viewer, I apologize. Some of this will be for potential new viewers, of course, and yeah. Anyways, let's get right into it, dude. But before we do, please like and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. I will thank you in advance for your subscription because I'm Canadian, eh? I just woke up, okay, April 1st, and it's snowing, okay? That's what I gotta deal with. It's annoying, dude. I thought someone was playing an April Fool's joke on me or something. But, anyways, so there was an article written regarding Francis Ngannou possibly or most likely going to the PFL. A lot of those articles were written on a few quotes from Dan Hardy. I'm going to read those quotes to you, as I said. The first one is, quote, "I just feel it in my bones. I know he's coming. I just know he's coming. I can feel it. It makes sense. His demands for the UFC is exactly what the PFL are offering." End quote. Next quote, "Everything that he was asking for from the UFC, it's already on the table over here. As long as the money's on the table alongside to match the heavyweight king's purse, then I think you'll be happy, and I think we can certainly do that for him." Okay. First of all, I want to ask somebody, anybody, who might have these answers. I mean, Dan Hardy in particular, but the requests that Francis and Ngannou were making from the UFC were pretty open and public, right? So everybody's aware of what they were. It was and these are the reasons as to why everybody keeps repeating the same line as, "Oh, it's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's not about the money." And then he goes and asks for $30 million in a boxing match. And I also want to say this because I was unaware of this myself. Obviously, when it comes to boxing, like, the main event gets paid a ton, right? And I went over when the DMs were leaked he was asking for $30 million. And I said, Deontay Wilder didn't even make that kind of money in his fight with Tyson Fury, and that was about what Tyson Fury made fighting Deontay Wilder. Those were two world champions in boxing in the heavyweight division, two more of the well-known heavyweight boxers. And I was thinking there's no way you could ever justify paying Francis Ngannou that amount of money for his first professional boxing match. Now, I was reading a few comment sections regarding stuff like with this, and people were pointing out that those purses were only for those fights, right? Tyson Fury, apparently, when he fights other, I don't know what you want to call them, contenders or what, he makes about $12.5 million, whereas his opponent's making like 2.5. So those big purses were dependent on the fact that, like, they thought Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury were gonna blow the roof off the place in terms of pay-per-views and everything else. But when it comes to his regular, like, mandatory contenders, he's making not even half of what he made to fight Deontay Wilder, and his, counterpart, who his adversary there, is making way less than that. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but I think it was the guy that cut him real bad, Tyson Fury. That guy made about $2.5 million. Now, for context, the UFC offered Francis Ngannou about $8 million per fight on a 4-fight deal, which the 4-fight deal was requested by Francis Ngannou. So one of his demands were met. He was then offered $8 million per fight. And for those of you that are going to argue with that number, I would ask you to go back and listen to his interview with Ariel Helwani when this news first broke, because somebody was arguing with me about that in my comment section, and I quoted from the Ariel Helwani interview where Francis Ngannou said, "The UFC told me I would be the highest paid heavyweight in history." Ariel Helwani then asked, "Okay, well, Brock Lesnar made about $8 million for UFC 200. Was it about that?" And Francis Ngannou says yes. So that's per fight, not for the whole contract, which is what people were trying to say, that it was $8 million for a 4-fight deal. No, it was $8 million per fight for a 4-fight deal. So he would have potentially made, and this is not including pay-per-view, whatever pay-per-view points would be on his contract as a UFC champion. At a minimum, in those 4 fights, he would have made $32 million, okay, which is insane money. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what these main event boxers make when they have a strong A side and a strong B side. I don't care about any of that, okay? It's rare that a boxer makes that kind of money. $32 million for 4 fights in the UFC. And the way that Francis's fights were trending, I know that the John Jones one may have been a little bit different, but, that's $8 million for what, 45 seconds? You know what I mean? His fights end ridiculously fast. But besides that, I want to ask Dan Hardy, or anybody who can answer this question for me. Does the PFL offer healthcare for all of their fighters year round, not when they're in camp or in the cage? Right? I mean, do they? Do they have like fighter advocacy? Maybe. Maybe that's what Dan Hardy's getting at, but the healthcare thing I don't see them having. They don't make a whole lot of money. The PFL, I would imagine, in the next 10 years, if they don't somehow blow up, like, will probably go bankrupt. I don't understand how they're affording these like massive payouts. I think that they're making large investments in certain fighters that have big names, by the way, because they came from the UFC, in an attempt to make their organization more well known and more profitable. But I just don't think that it's going to be the case. Like, I know that the PFL has some good fighters in certain divisions. Obviously, there's that guy that came from the PFL who fought on a UFC card, what, maybe 3-4 weeks ago? I can't remember. And I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but I know his nickname is like the Jaguar Paw or something. That dude's good, right? Like, they got good fighters, but they do not have good fighters in every weight division. They don't even have the same depth of good fighters as the UFC. Obviously, they might have better depth than Bellator. I don't know, but their heavyweight division, the only name that I recognized immediately after looking into a few of them, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. But the only name that I immediately recognized looking at their heavyweight roster was fucking Maurice Green, dude. Okay, the lazy-eyed knitter. Okay, is their most famous heavyweight that they've got there, and the only reason why his name is even slightly recognizable is because he fought in the UFC. Okay, with a record of 10-7, if he wasn't in the UFC, most likely would not be a recognizable name. I can't imagine that the PFL is able to. All of the demands that Francis Ngannou had on his contract are on the table already at the PFL. I just don't believe that. I don't for a second. I don't for a second believe that. What I do think is that they maybe offer him a contract that does not include exclusivity, which would mean he could go and, participate in these boxing matches that he wants to participate in so badly. But then what I would counter that with is him being at the PFL is gonna drastically lower his marketability and his value as a potential like pay-per-view boxing opponent, okay? Because the reason why he's famous and well known and was even in talks for that a little bit was because he's the UFC heavyweight champion, which he no longer is, okay? And just to preface for like a little bit of context, dude, I've been very critical of his decision from the very beginning. There have been a few larger MMA content creators who are kind of flip-flopping on this issue. One I would call out in particular, and I'm not doing this to like shit on the guy or fucking whatever, is Jesse on Fire. And I know that his motto kind of is like he doesn't want to talk bad about anybody because he wants to be able, he doesn't want to burn bridges before they've even fucking gotten there. You know what I mean? Because one day if he ends up maybe getting an opportunity to interview one of these people and they see that he's done a video criticizing them, they're way less likely to obviously participate in that interview. I don't give a shit about that. Also, I'm way smaller, so nobody's really going to see me talking shit. But you should join this channel before I do blow up, because I will, dude. We're MMA Guru certified, okay? He commented on my video, so gang, dude, okay? Anyways, Jesse on Fire's been flip-flopping. Like, when this first happened, he was all about Ngannou, saying he's going to make this much money, whatever. And then he did another video saying that he thinks that he made a huge mistake in all of this shit. I've got a tickling nose, dude. It's itchy. I don't know what's going on. But, he hasn't taken, like, a hard stance. And I think that in his heart of hearts, he knows Francis Ngannou fucked up. But he just doesn't want to say that because he doesn't want to burn bridges. Man, I've been fucking very consistent on this subject from the very beginning. I think he fucked up. I think that he's fooled a lot of people into thinking that it's not about the money. I think that as soon as he goes and asks for $30 million in a boxing match, which, by the way, boxing promoters are known for being extremely shady, make Dana White look like a fucking choir boy, okay? And they definitely take advantage of fighters. And they don't offer health care. And they don't give a fuck about you. They want to make a ton of money one night and then be done with it. Like, I don't... That's why I can't understand why people actually believe him when he says this isn't about the money. It's silly to me, dude. It's very silly. And also, somebody else in an older video that I did on this subject pointed out in my comment section that while you see the $30 million purse, what you don't realize is half of that goes to the promoter. Okay? So Tyson Fury gets a $15 million or a $30 million purse, pardon me, and he's got to fork over a ton of it to the promoter anyways. So you see the, like, you know what I mean, gross amount, which is not representative. And then also you got to factor in taxes and shit on top of that. Whereas he could have been so secure in his contract fighting for the UFC, $8 million a fight. Now, maybe that would have been contingent on if he remained the champion, which I think is fair. Okay. That's what he didn't want to do. Is, you know, if he goes in there and makes $8 million for the John Jones fight and loses, well, now he's on a contender's contract, right? But let's get into some of the PFL stuff, because Dan Hardy says they can meet all his demands. So let's just hypothetically give him that. Let's say that they have healthcare, which I looked on their website. I can't find anything about. I can't find anything else about it on the internet. I'm sure they have a fighter advocacy thing because, you know what I mean? I don't know. Who fucking knows, dude? But anyways, he will get way less pay than what the UFC offered him. That is 100%. There is no way that the PFL is going to be able to afford to pay Francis Ngannou $8 million a fight. It's not going to happen ever, okay? You have to win a whole fucking tournament in order to make $1 million, okay? But if we go off of the other high-profile people that they have there, right, that they've signed since to, you know, try to bolster their roster, I guess you could say, the highest paid PFL athlete as of 2022, which I don't even think he's signed with PFL anymore because he's doing the game bred boxing shit. Now maybe we're seeing the non-exclusivity clause like in effect here, and that's what's actually going on, or he realized, fuck that, I'll go do this. Anthony Pettis in 2022 had the highest purse. And I don't mean a tournament winner. I'm not talking about that because that's fucked if you think about it. You got to win like what, 8 fights? How many? Like 4 or 5 fights to make $1 million? Like, it's a big risk. You know what I mean? It's like the glory, like what the fuck were those things called? Last man standing. The one night tournaments where you got to fight 3 or 4 times in a night to win like $250K. That's what that was like. That was horrible, dude. Joe Schilling is a bad motherfucker, okay? Anyways, Anthony Pettis per fight, $750,000. So, I know that Instagram followers aren't everything, obviously. But let's try to... We're being generous here, okay? Let's try to base Francis Ngannou's pay off of how well known he is and things like that. Anthony Pettis with 1.4 million followers on Instagram. I don't know what his fucking Twitter looks like because I don't really use Twitter. $750,000. Francis Ngannou's he's got a good amount of followers. I think he's got 4.6 or something like that. So it's like times Pettis's pay by 3, which I don't think the PFL can afford. I think at best they'll double it, but I don't think they can afford 3 times. He would still only be making what? Well, not. I say only, and obviously it's relative to what we're talking about here. It's not only. That's a lot of money, but regardless, okay? He would only be making about, what, $2.25 million a fight, which I don't think they can afford. I think at best they would double it, right? 1.5 million per fight for Francis Ngannou. And then, of course, he would most likely win the heavyweight tournament because the PFL's heavyweight division is filled with fucking no ones. You're making way less money than the UFC. And this is based off of their highest paid athlete, okay? Now, maybe somehow, some way they can manage to come up with I don't know, dude. I can't see them coming up anywhere close to where the UFC did. It will most likely still be a multi-fight deal, which was another thing that Francis Ngannou had a fucking issue with, right? They wanted to sign him to an 8-fight deal, which I think is like the standard that the UFC has on their contracts. And Francis Ngannou said, no, I want 4. And they said, okay, well, we'll do that just for you. And this is all from Francis Ngannou's mouth, by the way. Every piece of information I give in this video regarding the Francis Ngannou situation is something that he said himself in an interview. I've been accused in my comment sections before of putting words in his mouth and all of this shit. If you are actually a fan and you have taken the time to listen to all of his interviews that he's done, you will know that all of this is coming from his own fucking mouth, okay? The UFC met that demand. The PFL will obviously want him on a multi-fight deal. That is what it is. So if they have the non-exclusivity thing, then maybe that's what Francis didn't like. But what I will say is, dude, there's a lot of people that think that the 8-fight deal thing is like predatory behavior or fucking monopolistic or whatever that word is. I don't think so, dude. If the UFC spends a ton of money in marketing you, right, and building your brand as a person, like to the point where Francis Ngannou probably had fucking no Instagram followers and now he's got almost 5 million because he's the UFC heavyweight champion, right? Those 3 letters mean a lot. Why would anybody think that a business would be totally cool with you just taking all of that hard work that they've put in, all of that money that they've spent in building you up? You just take all of that and go fucking see ya and go make money elsewhere. Like, I don't understand why people think that that's fucking normal. Like, you're protecting your investments when you do shit like that. That's what that is. It's pretty fucking simple, okay? The prestige that will come along with being the PFL heavyweight champion will be astronomically lower than the UFC heavyweight champion, which plays into my point about how his marketability and value for a boxing match in the future will be lowered significantly, okay? Because, while they may be able to play clips of him being the fucking PFL heavyweight champion, I would imagine that the UFC owns the rights to all of his fights, right? Like the film of all of his fights. And they're probably not going to be able to show them because a lot of people forget this too. I saw, and again, if you're like regular viewer or listener, you will have heard me say this before. I keep seeing people in comment sections saying, what the fuck, you guys only care when Francis done it? Conor McGregor left the UFC because he knew he had leverage, went and made this kind of money and fucking da-da-da. No, he didn't, you retards. He fucking Dana White co-promoted that shit, dude. The UFC was in on it. That's why it happened. And that's why it was as big as it was, okay? Even Conor McGregor, who at one point in time had more followers than the fucking entire UFC's page, sells a mil fucking fighting anybody, okay? Sells 1 million pay-per-view buys fighting no matter who. Francis Ngannou doesn't come close to that. He sells 250,000 pay-per-views, okay? With one of the best storylines that he would ever have in his career, right? Ex-teammates, fucking butt, whatever, blah, blah, against Cyril Gane, all this shit. With a second title fight on that card as well. Conor McGregor still knew he needed the UFC. And he did, dude. He did. Okay, enough with that shit. Francis Ngannou thinks he can do it on his own. Conor McGregor did not do it on his own, and that's why I appreciate what Conor said in his interview with Ariel Helwani recently. He said, I kind of think he made a mistake and fucking all this shit, whatever, about how, they put so much hard work into you and money and using the PI where you get free meals, free access to fucking equipment and trainers, everything. Fucking recovery, all of it, dude. The UFC puts a lot of money into this shit. And for you to just utilize all of it and then be like, no, they're not giving me enough, I want to fucking leave. Okay, dude. Anyways. I literally can't understand how nobody has pulled him aside at this point and said, you fucked up, dude. The problem is it's too late. The UFC already said they're not going to take him back. But they don't need to. People haven't forgotten about him. People have, I don't know the term for it. He's essentially forgotten though. Like he's fucking damn near forgotten. People don't care. We got John Jones back. He's the heavyweight champion. We got John Jones, Stipe Miocic. We got fucking, you know what I mean? It just doesn't matter. And I really do feel like all of the guys that big up these smaller organizations and try to make them seem extremely superior to the UFC, like, just because they're making less money, okay, doesn't mean that they're less predatory in their business practices or whatever. It means that they're fucking not as good at business. And also, it's going to be damn near impossible to establish an MMA brand anywhere close to the size of the UFC at this point, which is a problem that a lot of people have. They think that they've essentially created a monopoly, but like, or there's another term for it, a monosoppy or fucking some shit. I don't fucking know, dude. But whatever. If they had the chance, okay, all of these fucking organizations would be viewed at the exact same way. It's basically just, you make so much money, we hate you. Like, you're evil because you make money. It's fucking socialist behavior, okay? Stop it. No, I'm just kidding. But do you guys think that the PFL doesn't want to fucking make money? Like, I don't... Huh? Dude? But because they make less money, they're inherently less evil? Like, I don't get it. And a lot of these guys that big up this shit, like Dan Hardy, you know what this reminds me of, dude? This is like when like one of your friends decides, well, you know, they get with like a super progressive girl who's their new girlfriend or whatever, and she convinces them to go vegan. All right? And then you're like, "Yeah, how's your meal?" It's actually better, bro. I like it better than me eating meat. As they're fucking crying, gagging on their disgusting fucking processed vegetable oil burger. And they're like, "Yeah, it's actually better, man. I like it better over here on this side with the vegan stuff." It's nah, no, you don't, dude. The reason why Dan Hardy goes so hard on the UFC is because of the situation where like he screamed at Herb Dean and then got into an argument with another staffer backstage. And he talks so badly about the UFC and shit like that. And it's like, dude, this is like normal work shit. Like, this is normal work shit. I don't fucking get it. And then I've seen people say, well, like, well, Colby Covington fucking argues with these blah, 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 blah. Says shit about John Anik and all this shit. Why isn't he fired? Dan Hardy got into a slight argument with blah, 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 and he's fired. Well, Dan Hardy ain't bringing in money for the UFC. Colby Covington is. That's the difference. The UFC wasn't even interested in his comeback fight. I swear to God, that's why he's fucking salty towards them. Because Dan Hardy, for a while there, was trying to come back. And, you know, we're in talks with the UFC. He was acting all whatever, picking opponents that he wanted to fight and shit like that. And the UFC just went, nah. We're good, dude. We're good. And now they're all fucking salty towards them. Like, it's honestly so frustrating, dude, to watch this shit. And, man. Yeah. I don't know what to say. He like, literally fucked his career up, in my opinion. I understand that there's still going to be people who are on his side of this, and I'm not picking sides. I'm not like siding with the big fucking evil corporation, dude. And you guys think you're siding with the little guy. You guys think you're siding with the little guy because he thinks he's being virtuous, and he has made that like the focal point of all of this, that he's being virtuous. He's not doing this for him. He's doing this for whatever. He's not doing this for money. He's doing this for whatever. I think it's all bullshit. And I think that slowly came out as he makes more and more statements. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point. And the fact that he is now, you know, he's at the point where he has to sign with the PFL. Because for those of you that don't remember, Scott Coker was talking about him a little bit too. I think Francis priced himself out. Scott Coker literally said the amount of money that we would have to pay him to get him to come here, we would be able to sign, like, you know, a bunch of other guys with that money and invest in young talent, basically is what he said. Which means Francis Ngannou is over here pricing himself out of every fucking opportunity that has came his way since he's left the UFC. Which means it is about the money, dude. You know, Scott Coker, in terms of fight promoters, seems to be a pretty honest guy. So if he's saying that, you know, they can't afford Francis Ngannou, well, then they can't afford Francis Ngannou. And I don't see the PFL being able to afford him. I don't care what him and fucking Deontay Wilder say, okay? They're not gonna. If they do, they won't make the kind of money people think they're gonna make. I've literally seen people in comment sections say they're gonna make $100 million. Where is that figure coming from? Explain to me. Do the math for me, please. How are they making $100 million? I beg of you to explain that to me, okay? He fucked his career up, man. And I know that he kind of was at a point where, like, he could have retired and he would have had a pretty damn good legacy, but he could have made so much more money. And stop fucking saying it's not about the money. Because he thought, oh, if I make 32 million in 4 fights, I make 30 million in 1 fight. And he was just doing stupid basic math like that. And then they went, what, you think you're going to get $30 million for a fucking boxing fight? No, dude. Like, seriously, man. And all these guys that are salty towards the UFC and then go and work for other fight promoters, it's like, fuck off. If they had the chance to, they would be just as, quote, predatory as the UFC would be, okay? The reason why PFL is paying their guys so well right now, and they're not even paying everybody well, they're paying their high-level talent that have big names, because they came from the UFC, because it's an initial investment. They're trying to they're trying to acquire all of these big names so that their promotion can be looked at as higher than it is right now. And I don't think it's going to work. And Dan Hardy's just salty. So, like, anytime he talks about the UFC, take whatever he says with a grain of salt that is emanating off of his body, because that's how salty he is. And yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about this. Anyways, that's my thoughts, reaction to Francis Ngannou news, all that good shit. Thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next video. Bye-bye.